There is a particular silence that some people come home to, and it is the loudest silence in the world. It is the silence of a house that used to be full. For years, maybe for decades, your days were shaped by the noise of other lives, the footsteps on the stairs, the slammed doors, the voices calling for you, the endless needs that filled every hour and left you longing, sometimes for just a moment of quiet. And now, the quiet has come. The children you raised have grown and gone, off to their own lives, their own homes, their own futures, exactly as you always hoped they would. And the house that was once too full is now too empty. And the silence you once prayed for has become the very thing you cannot bear. You walk through rooms that stay clean because no one messes them. You cook too much food out of habit. You catch yourself listening for sounds that do not come. And underneath it all is a question you may not have expected to face. If I am not needed the way I was, if the role that filled my every waking hour for so long is suddenly over, then who am I now? If that is where you are tonight, if your children are grown and gone and the house has fallen silent, if you feel unneeded and unmoored, grieving a loss the world keeps telling you to celebrate, wondering what your purpose is now that the great work of raising them is done, then I want to sit with you for this hour, gently, not to rush you past the grief because it is real and it deserves to be honored, but to tell you something true and quietly hopeful, that the empty nest is not the end of your purpose, that the years you poured out were never wasted, and that the God who gave you those children for a season has not run out of seasons for you. So stay with me, and let me speak gently to the one whose house has grown quiet. And let me say at the start what I will not do, so you can trust me through this hour. I am not going to tell you to cheer up, that you should be grateful, that this is what you wanted, all the things people say that make you feel more alone in your grief. And I am not going to promise you that your children will call more often, or move back closer, or that the relationship will return to what it was, because I cannot promise what is not mine to promise, and you have had enough of cheap reassurances. What I can offer you is something steadier, the truth that your grief is real and allowed, that the love you poured out was never wasted, that your worth was never only in being needed, and that the God who walked with you through every season of raising them is walking with you into this one too, with as much purpose for you here as He has ever had. You are not being dismissed from a life of meaning. You are being led through a hard and quiet doorway into the next room of it. Let me begin by simply naming what this is like, because the world rarely gives you permission to call it what it is. It is the literal silence, and how loud it is. No one warns you about the sound of an empty house, the way the quiet seems to have a weight to it, the way a room can echo with absence. You move through your days and the silence follows you, in the kitchen that no longer bustles, at the table set for fewer, in the evenings that no longer fill with the comings and goings of young lives. And the silence is not peaceful, not at first. It is heavy, a constant reminder of who is no longer there, a quiet you did not choose and do not know how to fill. And it ambushes you in the small things, the ordinary habits that have nowhere to land anymore. You reach for the second cart of groceries you no longer need. You start to call up the stairs before you remember there is no one up there to answer. You set the table and have to take the extra plates back. You hear a song or smell a meal you used to make for them, or pass an open bedroom door, and the absence rushes in fresh, as if for the first time. These small ambushes are some of the hardest, because they catch you off guard, in the middle of an ordinary day, and remind you that the rhythm your whole life was set to has simply stopped. The body remembers what the mind is trying to accept. Your hands still move toward a life that is over, and every time they do, the quiet answers back, and you feel the loss again in your chest. This is not weakness or melodrama. It is what it feels like when a way of living that lasted decades comes, almost overnight, to an end. It is the loss of the role that defined you. For years, you knew exactly who you were and what you were for. You were the one who made the meals, kept the schedules, dried the tears, drove to the practices, stayed up worrying, held it all together. Being their parent was not just something you did, it became who you were, the center around which your whole identity was organized. And now that role, the one that gave shape and meaning to your days, has changed beyond recognition. And you are left holding an identity with the center taken out of it. No longer sure what you are for. No longer certain who you are when you are not actively needed. It can feel almost like a kind of retirement that no one prepared you for, except that this was not a job you clocked out of. It was your life, your heart, your every waking thought for decades. People who retire from careers often struggle to know who they are without the title, and you are facing something even deeper. Because parenting was never just a title. It was woven into the very fibers of your identity, your daily rhythms, your sense of mattering in the world. To have that change so suddenly can leave you feeling like a stranger to yourself, going through the motions of a life whose central organizing purpose has quietly dissolved. If you catch yourself, some mornings, not quite knowing what to do with your hands, your hours, your heart, that is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is the natural disorientation of a soul that organized itself around one great purpose for a very long time, and is now, slowly, having to find its bearings again. Be patient with that disorientation. Finding yourself again after so long is not the work of a day, and the God who knew you before any of your roles is gently waiting to help you remember who you have always been to Him. It is the strange ache of being unneeded. For so long, you were essential. Someone depended on you for everything, could not function without you, needed you in 100 urgent ways every single day. And being needed like that, exhausting as it was, gave you a place in the world, a sense that your presence mattered, that you were indispensable. Now the urgent needs have stopped. The phone does not ring with emergencies. No one is waiting for you to fix things. And while part of you is relieved, another part feels suddenly weightless in a way that is almost frightening, as though you have lost not just your tasks, but your very importance, your reason for being so needed. There is a strange loneliness in being unneeded that is hard to admit, because it sounds almost ungrateful to say it. For years, you may have longed for less to do, fewer demands, a moment to yourself. And now that the demands have lifted, you find the freedom does not feel the way you imagined. It feels like floating, untethered, as though you have been cut loose from the thing that anchored you to your days. Being needed, for all its exhaustion, gave your life a clear shape and an obvious meaning. Every day you knew exactly why you got up in the morning. Now the structure is gone, and the open hours that should feel like a gift can feel instead like a void. A vast, quiet space you do not know how to fill. A freedom you did not quite want. If you feel this, you are not ungrateful, and you are not strange. You are a person whose sense of purpose was, very naturally, woven into being needed, and who is now having to learn perhaps for the first time in decades, a different and deeper foundation for your worth, one that does not depend on anyone needing you at all. It is the grief that no one will let you grieve. This may be the hardest part, because the world looks at the empty nest and sees something to celebrate: freedom, rest, time for yourself. And so when you feel sorrow instead, you feel you have no right to it. People say how wonderful it must be to have your time back, and you smile and agree, while inside you are mourning. And grief that cannot be spoken, grief the world insists should be happiness, is a lonely grief indeed. You are mourning something real, the end of an era, the daily presence of people you love, a whole way of life that is simply over. And you are doing it in secret, because no one seems to understand that this good and right thing is also, somehow, a death. And it is a particular kind of grief, because it has no funeral, no ritual, no casserole brought to the door, no one saying they are sorry for your loss. The losses the world recognizes come with permission to mourn, and people gathered around to help you carry it. But this loss comes disguised as a celebration, and so you grieve it alone, often while smiling and reassuring everyone that you are fine, that yes, it is wonderful, that of course you are happy for them. And you are happy for them, truly, which is part of what makes it so confusing. Because the joy and the grief are tangled together and will not separate. You can be genuinely glad your children are thriving and genuinely heartbroken that they are gone, both at once. And the world's insistence that you should feel only the first leaves you no room to honor the second. So hear this clearly. Your grief is legitimate. It is not a failure of gratitude or a lack of faith. It is the appropriate response to a genuine loss. And you have every right to mourn what is truly over, even as you celebrate what your children are becoming. Both are true. Both are allowed. And God makes room for both, even when the world does not. It is the constant, low hum of letting go. They are out there now, in a world you cannot control, facing things you cannot protect them from, making choices you cannot make for them. And the worry does not end when they leave. It only changes shape, becoming a quieter, more helpless thing. A love that still reaches toward them but can no longer do much except pray. You spent years able to step in, to fix, to shield. Now you must learn to love them from a distance, to release them into a life that is theirs and not yours. And the letting go is a daily ache. 100 small surrenders of the control you once had. And it is a peculiar kind of helplessness, this loving someone you can no longer protect. When they were small, if they were hurting, you could gather them up. If they were in danger, you could intervene. If they were making a mistake, you could step in. Now you watch from a distance as they navigate a hard world, make choices you would not make, stumble into struggles you can see coming but cannot prevent, and you are left with your love and your prayers, and very little else. The hands that once fixed everything now mostly fold in prayer, because that is what is left to you. And while prayer is, in truth, the most powerful thing you could ever do for them, it does not always feel that way. It can feel like helplessness dressed up, like standing on a far shore watching someone you love sail into weather you cannot calm. If that helpless ache is in you, hear this. Handing your children over to God is not doing nothing. It is doing the one thing that actually reaches them everywhere you cannot go. Your prayers travel where your hands no longer can, and the God you entrust them to is already there, on every shore they will ever land on, long before they arrive. And there is a quiet promotion hidden in that helplessness, if you can see it. For all the years you were able to fix and shield and step in, you were, in a sense, standing between your child and God, the first responder, the one they ran to. Now that you can no longer be that, they are learning to run to God directly, to lean on Him in the places you used to fill, to discover a keeping deeper than yours. Your stepping back is making room for them to find God for themselves, in ways they never could while you were always there to catch them. The very helplessness you grieve is creating the space in which their own faith can grow, their own dependence on God can deepen, their own walk with Him can become truly theirs and not merely an extension of yours. You were never meant to be their Savior. You were meant to point them to the one who is. And then, hardest of all, to step aside and let Him be it. The letting go is not only their growing up, it is, in its own way, they're growing toward the God who will keep them long after you no longer can. And underneath it all is the haunting question of purpose. If raising them was your great work, your central calling, the thing you gave your best years and your whole self to, then what now? What is left when the main project of your life is complete? Is the rest of your time just a long winding down, a coda after the real music is finished? You look at the years ahead and wonder what they are even for, whether anything you do now could matter the way that did, whether your most meaningful days are simply behind you. Let me speak directly to that question, because it is the deepest ache in all of this, and the truth is far more hopeful than the fear. And I want to name how disorienting this question is, because for so long, you did not have to ask it. Your purpose was obvious, handed to you fresh every morning by people who needed you. You never had to wonder what your day was for. Now, for perhaps the first time in decades, the question of purpose is open again. And open questions can be frightening when you have grown used to having the answer handed to you. But consider that an open question is not the same as no answer. It is an invitation to discover an answer you have not had to seek in a very long time. The God who gave you purpose in the obvious season has purpose for you in this one too. But it may be a purpose you have to seek, rather than one that arrives unbidden at your door. That seeking can feel unsettling. It can also become, if you let it, one of the richest spiritual journeys of your life. A returning to God with the oldest question of all. What now, Lord? And a listening for an answer that He delights to give to those who ask. The open question is not a void, it is a doorway, and God is standing in it. Here is the truth, and I want you to hold it gently. The goal of raising a child was always, from the very beginning, to let them go. This is the strange and beautiful paradox at the heart of parenting. Every other kind of love seeks to hold on, to keep, to draw closer. But this love, from the first day, was preparing for a release. You were never raising someone to keep, you were raising someone to send. And so the empty nest, painful as it is not the failure of your parenting, it is its success. The very ache you feel is the proof that you did the thing you were supposed to do. You loved them well enough that they were able to leave, strong enough to stand on their own, whole enough to build a life beyond your door. The letting go is not the opposite of good parenting. It is the final, hardest, most selfless act of it. And the God who designed love this way, who built releasing into the very heart of raising, understands your grief completely, and has not left you without purpose on the other side of it. It helps to name plainly what this means, because the grief can blind you to it. The empty nest is not evidence that something ended badly. It is evidence that something ended well. Every hard, faithful, exhausting thing you did for 2 decades was quietly aiming at this exact outcome: a person able to live without you. You were not failing toward an empty house. You were succeeding toward one. And while that truth does not erase the ache, it can change what the ache means. This is not the pain of something broken. It is the bittersweet ache of something completed. The particular sorrow that comes only at the end of a thing done well. The way a runner's legs burn most at the finish line they trained so hard to reach. Let the grief be, then, not the grief of failure, but the honorable ache of a long race faithfully run. A great work brought, at real cost to your own heart, to its proper and beautiful end. Let me tell you about a mother who knew, from the very beginning, that she would have to let her child go. Her name was Mary, and the child she raised was no ordinary child. From the start, she understood that this son was not entirely hers to keep, that he belonged to a purpose far larger than her home. When he was still a baby, an old man in the temple told her that this child was destined for great things. And then he said something that must have pierced her heart, that a sword would one day pierce through her own soul also. She was told, in other words, at the very beginning, that loving this child would cost her, that there would be a sword, that the joy of him and the pain of releasing him were bound together. And do you know what the scripture tells us she did with all of this? It says, again and again, that Mary kept all these things and pondered them in her heart. She treasured, she held each moment close. She gathered up the memories and folded them deep inside. Because some part of her knew that she would not be able to keep him, only to keep the memory of him. And when the time came, she had to do exactly what every parent must do, only more so. She had to release him. When he grew up and stepped into the work he was born for, she had to let him go, out of her home, into the crowds, into a calling that would take him far beyond anything she could share or control or protect him from. There is a moment when she comes to him with a request, and he gently reminds her that his hour, his mission, his life, now followed a purpose beyond her wishes. It must have been hard, achingly hard, to watch the child she had raised step fully into a life that was his and not hers, to become who he was always meant to be, which meant becoming someone she had to release. But she did it. She loved him enough to let him go to his purpose, even knowing the sword it would cost her. And there is something in her example for every parent who must watch a child choose a path the parent would not have chosen, or step into a calling that takes them far away, or become someone the parent does not fully understand. Mary did not cling. She did not try to keep her son small and close within a life she could manage. When his hour came, she released him to be who he was made to be, even though it led him away from her. That is the deepest and hardest form of a parent's love, to want for your child the life they were made for, more than you want the comfort of keeping them near. Most of us are not asked to release our children to anything as costly as Mary was, but we are all asked, in our own measure, to love our children enough to let them go into lives that are theirs and not ours, to want their flourishing more than our own comfort, to open our hands when everything in us wants to hold on. Mary shows us it can be done, and that doing it is not a failure of love, but its highest expression. And in releasing him, she did not stop being his mother. She simply became his mother in a new way, no longer the one who held him, but the one who had given him to the world he was made for. And notice what her treasuring teaches every parent facing the quiet. She kept all these things and pondered them in her heart, because she understood something we often forget in the rush of the busy years, that the moments are passing even as they happen, that the child in front of you today will not be there in this form tomorrow, that the whole of parenting is a long, slow letting go that begins the day they are born. Most of us do not ponder while it is happening. We are too tired, too busy, too buried in the relentless work of the present to treasure it. And then it is over, and we wish we had held the moments more consciously, kept them more carefully, been more present to a season we did not know was so short. If there is grief in that for you tonight, a wishing you had savored it more, hear this gently. The God who gave you those years is not measuring your parenthood by how perfectly you treasured every moment. He gathered up every one of them himself, even the ones you were too weary to notice, and not one was lost on him. What you failed to fully savor, he has kept, and the love that ran underneath even your most exhausted, distracted days was seen and counted by the one who misses nothing. Before I go further, let me pause for something gently. Sometimes the grief of the empty nest, the silence, the loss of purpose can sink into something heavier, a depression, a sense that your useful life is over and there is nothing left to live for. If that heaviness has come close to you tonight, please do not carry it alone. Reach out to someone you trust, a friend, a pastor, a counselor, or a helpline in your country, and let yourself be accompanied through this passage. This is a real and significant transition, and there is no shame in needing help to walk through it. Your life is not over, and your purpose is not gone, even when the silence makes it feel that way. And if it would help, you can write one word in the comments, just the word season, so you can see how many others are walking through this same quiet passage tonight, and know you are not alone in it. Now let me tell you about a mother who had to let her child go not once, but twice. In the book of Exodus, there is a mother named Jochebed, and she faced a letting go more wrenching than most. She lived in a time when her people were enslaved, and her baby son's life was in danger from the moment he was born. And so, this mother did something that must have torn her heart in two. To save his life, she placed her baby in a little basket and set him afloat on the river, releasing him into the current, into the hands of God, because she could not keep him safe by holding on. She let him go onto the water, not knowing if she would ever see him again, trusting her most precious treasure to a river and to God. And in a turn only God could arrange, the baby was found by the daughter of the very ruler who threatened him, and by a quiet miracle, Jochebed was given her own son back, for a little while, to nurse him. But even then, the keeping was temporary. The day came when she had to hand him over again, to give him up to be raised in a palace, in a world she could never enter. To become someone she would have to watch from a distance, if at all. Twice this mother released the child she loved. Twice she had to trust God with a son she could not hold on to. And there is a lesson in that trust for every parent learning to open their hands. Jochebed could not keep her son safe by clinging to him. Clinging would have meant his death. Her only hope was to release him into hands stronger than her own, to entrust him to a God who could protect him where she could not, in places she could not follow. That is precisely the surrender every parent is eventually asked to make, only usually less dramatically. There comes a point where holding on tighter does not keep your child safer. It only keeps you anxious and them constrained. The safest place for your child was never your grip. It was always God's keeping. So the releasing that feels like losing them is actually placing them in the only hands that can truly hold them. Hands that reach into every place yours cannot, that stay awake when you cannot, that go with them into every unknown. You must watch them enter, alone. Every parent of a grown child is invited into that same trust, to lay the one you love on the water of God's providence, and to believe that the current carrying them out of your reach is carrying them straight into His. And it would have been so easy for her to see only loss, to feel that her motherhood had been stolen, reduced to a basket on a river and a child raised by someone else. But here is what God did with that release. The son she let go became Moses, the one God would use to set an entire enslaved nation free. The releasing she grieved was the very thing through which her child became who he was meant to be, and did what he was born to do. Her letting go was not the end of her purpose as his mother. It was the doorway to a purpose larger than she could have imagined. The basket on the river was not the loss of her son. It was the launching of him. And the God who received that child from her trembling hands did not waste a single thing she had poured into him. And here is something worth pausing on, because it speaks to the helplessness you may feel now. Even after Jochebed released her son into the palace, she had given him something no palace could take away. Those early years she had with him, nursing him, holding him, whispering to him who his people were and who his God was, went with him into a world she could not enter. The foundation she laid in the brief time she had did not stay behind when he left. It traveled with him, shaping the man he became, surfacing decades later when he chose his suffering people over the comforts of the palace. You may feel now that your influence ended when your children walked out the door, that whatever you were able to give them is finished and out of your hands. But it is not finished. What you poured into them in the years you had goes with them, into rooms you will never see, into decisions you will never witness, into the shape of who they are becoming, far from your sight. The foundation you laid does not stay behind in the empty house. It walks out the door inside them, and it keeps doing its quiet work long after your active hand is gone. You gave them more than you know, and it is still with them, still working, still bearing fruit you cannot see. And to show you that the hidden years a parent pours out are never small in God's eyes, let me tell you about a woman named Susanna Wesley. She lived a hard and largely hidden life centuries ago, a mother of many children in a home marked by poverty, debt, illness, and sorrow. She gave birth to 19 children and buried more than half of them in infancy, a grief almost too heavy to imagine. Her husband was often away, and money was always short, and her days were swallowed up entirely by the relentless work of raising and teaching the children who survived. She had no public platform, no recognition, no stage. Her entire world was her home and her children. She poured herself into them, teaching each one, giving each one her individual attention, praying for them so constantly that, having no private room to escape to, she would simply pull her apron up over her head as a signal to the children that she was talking to God and must not be disturbed. Hers was the most hidden of lives, a mother lost in the endless, unseen labor of the home. And then, one by one, her children grew, and she had to release them, as every parent must, into a world she could not follow them into. But the hidden years she had poured out did not vanish into the silence of an empty house. 2 of her sons grew up to lead a movement that swept across nations and changed the course of history. And one of them wrote so many songs of faith that the church has sung them for centuries since. The point is not that every parent's children will become famous. They will not, and that was never the measure. The point is that this mother's hidden, unseen, homebound years of pouring herself into her children were not small, were not wasted, were not the lesser part of her life. They were the soil out of which something vast and lasting grew. Her mission field was her own kitchen, and its harvest reached around the world. And if God could take the hidden faithfulness of one obscure mother and let it echo through centuries, then the years you poured into your own children, unseen and unrewarded as they may have felt, are not lost either. They are seeds planted in eternity, and you may never know, on this side, how far their fruit will reach. And there is a particular comfort in how hidden her work was, because so much of a parent's labor is hidden, and it can feel, in the empty house, as though all those unseen years simply vanished into thin air, witnessed by no one, remembered by no one, adding up to nothing anyone would ever notice. Susanna had no audience for the 10,000 ordinary acts of her motherhood, the meals, the lessons, the prayers under the apron, the patient teaching repeated 1,000 times. No one was watching. No one was keeping score. And yet God was. Every hidden act of love, every unwitnessed sacrifice, every prayer no one heard but Him, was seen and gathered and used by a God who specializes in honoring exactly the faithfulness the world overlooks. The world celebrates the visible and the loud. God treasures the hidden and the faithful. So if your years of parenting feel invisible now, unrewarded, unnoticed, poured out into a void that gave nothing back, hear this: they were never invisible to God. He saw every one of them. He has kept every one of them. And in His economy, the hidden faithfulness of a parent is among the most honored work a human being can do, whether or not a single other person ever sees it. So let me tell you what is actually true. The truth all of this has been pointing toward. This is not the end of your seasons. It is the turning of one. The scripture says that to everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under heaven. A season. Not the only season. Not the last season. But one season among many that a life contains. The years of active parenting were a season, rich and demanding and beautiful. And now that season is closing, as seasons do. But the closing of one season has never, in the economy of God, meant the end of all seasons. Winter follows autumn, but spring follows winter. The God who authored the season that is ending is the same God authoring the season that is beginning. And He has purpose woven into this new one just as surely as He did the last. You are not at the end of your life's purposes. You are at the turning between two seasons. And the next one, though it looks different, is no less full of God's intention for you. And there is a quiet dignity in the way God orders a life into seasons, if you can receive it. He did not design human life to do one thing forever. He built it to move, to change, to unfold in chapters, each with its own purpose, its own gifts, its own work. The season of intense, hands-on raising was never meant to last forever, any more than spring is meant to last all year. It was always going to give way to something else. Not because anything went wrong, but because that is how God designed a life to grow. To grieve the passing of a season is right and good, but to believe that when one season ends, all meaning ends with it, is to misunderstand the one who made the seasons. He is not a God of a single chapter. He is the author of the whole book, and he does not write characters only to abandon them once their most obvious storyline is complete. He has more chapters for you, and they are not afterthoughts or epilogues. They are full and intended parts of the story he is telling with your life. The turning of this season is not the closing of the book. It is the beginning of a chapter he has been planning all along. And often the chapters God writes in the second half of a life are the ones that bless the most people, because they are written by someone who has finally been seasoned enough to write them. The wisdom you have gathered, the compassion suffering has taught you, the faith deepened by decades of walking with God, all of it has been preparing you, without your knowing, for the very season you now fear is empty. Nothing you have lived was wasted. It was all being gathered into who you are becoming, for a purpose still ahead. The God who wastes nothing has been saving up the lessons of your whole life for this next chapter. And he is not about to discard the most prepared, most seasoned version of you, just as it is finally ready to be used. And your worth was never actually your role. This is the lie the grief whispers, that because your role has changed, your worth has diminished, that you were valuable because you were needed, and are now worth less because you are needed less. But you were never precious to God because you were a parent. You were precious to God before you ever had children, and you will be precious to Him long after the active work of raising them is done. Your identity as His beloved child does not rise and fall with your usefulness to anyone else. The role of parent was something you did, gloriously, for a season. It was never the whole of who you are. Underneath the role, beneath all the doing, there is a self that God made and loves for its own sake. And that self did not leave when the children did. You are still here. You are still His. And your worth was never in the role you are grieving. It was always in the God who made you and calls you His own. This is worth sitting with, because so much of the empty nest grief is really an identity grief, a fear that without the role, you yourself have somehow diminished, become less, faded. But think of how God related to you before you were ever a parent. He knew you, loved you, called you His own, delighted in you, when you were a child yourself, long before you had children of your own. That love was complete then. It did not need you to become a parent to be whole. And it is just as complete now, on the other side of active parenting, undiminished by the change in your role. You have not become less to God because fewer people need you. In His eyes, you are exactly as precious tonight, in the quiet house, as you were on the busiest, most needed day of your life. Because His valuing of you was never tied to your function. You are not a parent to God. You are a child, His child, loved for who you are and not for what you do. And that identity, the deepest and truest one you have, did not pack a bag and move out. It remains, as it always was, the unshakable ground of your worth, untouched by the emptying of the nest. And God is not finished giving you fruit to bear. There is a beautiful promise in the Scriptures that the faithful shall still bring forth fruit in old age, that they shall be fat and flourishing. Still bring forth fruit, not they bore their fruit and now they are done. Still, even now, even in the later seasons, Even after the obvious work is finished, there is fruit yet to come. And there is another promise, the prayer of an aging believer who asks God not to forsake him when he is old and gray-headed, until he has shown God's strength to the next generation, to those that are yet to come. Do you hear what that means? Even in the later years, there is a next generation to bless, a strength of God still to be shown, a purpose reaching forward to people not yet born. Your fruitful years are not behind you. Some of your most meaningful fruit, the wisdom, the prayer, the steady witness, the love poured into grandchildren or neighbors or a whole community, may be still ahead.
In the very season you fear is empty,
And the God who calls you into this new season also promises to carry you through it. He says, "Even to your old age I am He, and even to gray hairs will I carry you. I have made, and I will bear. Even I will carry, and will deliver you." Hear the tenderness in that. The same God who carried you through the exhausting years of raising children, who held you up through the sleepless nights and the endless demands, is not going to set you down now that the obvious work is done. He will carry you into your old age, all the way to gray hairs, all the way to the end, bearing you as He always has. You will not face the new season under your own strength, any more than you faced the last one alone. The arms that carried you here will carry you onward. So you do not need to be afraid of the years ahead, of growing older, of facing the unknown of a life reshaped. The one who made you has promised to bear you the whole way, and He has never once set down anyone He promised to carry. He carried you when you were needed. He will carry you now that you are learning to be needed differently. His arms do not tire, and they will not let you go. And the work God is doing in you is not finished, any more than His work in your children is. There is a promise that the one who began a good work in you will carry it on toward completion. That promise was not only for your children, it was for you. God did not begin His good work in your soul and then set it aside the moment your parenting was done. He is still forming you, still growing you, still carrying His purposes in you forward toward a completion you have not yet reached. You are not a finished project gathering dust now that your main task is over. You are a work still in progress, in the hands of an artist who does not abandon what he has begun. The best of what God is making of you may still be ahead, in the very years you feared were only for winding down. He is not done with your children, and He is not done with you. And He will carry both His works, theirs and yours, all the way to the beautiful completion He intends.
so let me speak now to the lies that the empty nest has been telling you.
The first lie is that your best years are behind you, that everything from here is a long decline. But this is simply not how God measures a life. The years of raising children were precious, but they were not the peak after which everything descends. They were one rich chapter in a story that is still being written. Some of the deepest, wisest, most fruitful years of a person's life come after the active parenting is done, when there is finally time to pray, to mentor, to love more widely, to give in ways the demanding years never allowed. Your best years are not necessarily behind you. They may simply be different from here, and some of them may be better than you can imagine, in ways you cannot yet see from inside the grief.
Consider how many of the people who have blessed the world most deeply did their most significant work in the second half of life, after the obvious, demanding years were behind them. the grandmother whose prayers shaped a family for generations, the older friend whose hard-won wisdom steadied 100 younger souls, the retired worker who finally had time to serve, to mentor, to give in ways the busy years never allowed. There is a particular kind of fruit that can only grow in the later seasons, after the soil of a life has been deepened by decades of joy and sorrow and faithfulness, and it is often the sweetest fruit of all. The world tells you that youth is the peak and everything after is decline. But God does not measure a life that way. In His economy, the later years can be the most fruitful, the most generous, the most quietly powerful of all, because they are seasoned with everything the earlier years taught you. Do not believe the lie that your meaningful days are spent. Some of the most meaningful may be the ones still ahead, waiting in the very season the world told you to dread. The second lie is that you are not needed anymore, that your usefulness has ended. But the truth is that you are needed still, only differently. Your grown children need you in a new way now, not as a manager, but as a steady presence, a source of wisdom, a safe place to return to. And beyond them, there is a world full of people who need exactly what your years have given you. The younger parent who needs encouragement, the lonely person who needs a friend, the community that needs the time and love you finally have to give. The need did not end. It changed. And the love you poured so faithfully into your children for all those years does not have to stop. It can simply find new places to flow. In fact, there is a whole world of people who are quietly starving for exactly what you now have time and love to give. The young mother down the street, overwhelmed and isolated, who would be saved by an older woman simply saying, "I have been where you are, and it gets better. Let me help." The lonely widower at church who has no one to share a meal with. The struggling young couple who need the steadying wisdom of someone who has walked the long road of marriage and family. The child without a present grandparent. The teenager without a steady adult. The neighbor going through what you have already survived. The world is full of people who need precisely the kind of seasoned, patient, sacrificial love that decades of parenting forged in you, and who will never have a parent's love unless someone like you decides to give it. Your nest is empty, but the world is not. And the love that has nowhere to land in your own home is desperately needed just beyond your door. You are not less needed than you were. You are needed by more people than ever, if you will let your love find them. The third lie is that you have no purpose without them, that raising them was the only meaningful thing you were for. But you were never created only to be a parent. You were created to know and love God, to reflect Him, to do the good works He prepared for you, and parenting was one magnificent expression of that calling, not its entirety. The same God who gave you purpose in raising children has purpose for you now, in this season, purpose you may not see clearly yet, but which is no less real. You did not lose your reason for being when they left. You are simply being invited into the next expression of a purpose that was always bigger than any single role. And it may help to remember that even in the parenting years, your truest purpose was never simply the tasks. It was who you were becoming and who you were reflecting through them. The cooking and driving and managing were the form your purpose took in that season, but the purpose underneath, to love, to serve, to point people toward God, to pour yourself out for others, was deeper than any of those tasks, and it does not retire when the tasks end. The same heart that loved your children can love 100 others. The same faithfulness you showed at home can bless a wider world. The same God you served in the small acts of parenting You can serve in whatever He sets before you now. The purpose was never the diapers or the carpools or the school forms. Those were just its costume for a season. The purpose itself, to be His and to pour out His love, is as alive in you tonight as it ever was. And it is simply waiting to put on new clothes for a new season. You did not lose your purpose. You are only changing the garments it wears. And the fourth lie is that the silence means something has gone wrong, that if they truly loved you, they would not have gone, that the empty house is a kind of abandonment. But the silence does not mean you failed or that they do not love you. It means you succeeded. It means you raised people capable of building their own lives, which is exactly what you were trying to do. Their leaving is not a rejection of you. It is the fruit of your good work, the natural and right unfolding of a love that always aimed at their flourishing, even when their flourishing led them away from your door. The empty nest is not the sign of a love that failed. It is the sign of a love that did precisely what love is supposed to do. Consider the alternative, and you will see how strange it would be to wish for it. If your children had not left, if they could not function without you, if they remained as dependent at 30 as they were at 3, that would not be a sign of your success. It would be a sign that something had gone wrong. The grief you feel is, in a strange way, the receipt for a job well done. The very capability that took them away from you is the capability you spent decades building into them. You are not raising permanent dependence. You are raising whole, free, capable adults. And the proof that you succeeded is precisely that they were able to go. So when the silence tempts you to feel like a failure, turn it around. The silence is the sound of your success. Those grown children out there, building lives, standing on their own, are your life's work walking around in the world, doing exactly what you raised them to do. That is not abandonment. That is a diploma. You did the hard, long, selfless work of making yourself unnecessary, which is the strangest and highest aim of a parent's love. And you did it. The quiet house is not your failure. It is your finished masterpiece, out on display in the world. So what do you do when the house has grown quiet and you are learning who you are again? A few gentle things. Let yourself grieve it honestly, without apology. This is a real loss, the end of a whole era of your life, and grief is the appropriate response to loss, even good and necessary loss. Do not let anyone, including yourself, rush you past the mourning or shame you for feeling it. Give yourself permission to be sad, to miss what is gone, to weep for the years that are over, even as you are glad they happened. Grief honored tends to soften over time. Grief denied only festers. So let yourself feel the weight of this passage. Bring your sorrow honestly to God, and trust that mourning a season well is part of how you become ready for the next one. And let the silence itself, the very quiet you have been dreading, become something sacred rather than something to flee. Remember Susanna, who pulled her apron over her head to find God in the middle of a house full of noise. You now have what she could only steal in scraps: quiet, space, time. The same silence that aches with absence can become, if you let it, the most fertile prayer closet you have ever had, a place to finally hear the God who was always speaking beneath the noise of the busy years. So do not rush to fill every quiet hour, to drown the silence in distraction the moment it falls. Let some of it stay. Sit in it with God. Let the emptiness of the house become the spaciousness of a soul finally able to listen. Many people discover that the quiet they feared becomes the doorway to the closest walk with God they have ever known, because for the first time in decades, there is room to hear Him. The silence is not only loss. Handed to God, it can become the holiest gift this season has to offer. Release them as the final act of love, not as an abandonment. The letting go that feels like loss is actually the completion of your calling. So release your children, in your heart and in your prayers, into the hands of the God who loves them even more than you do. Hand over the worry you cannot do anything with anyway. Entrust them to the one who can be with them everywhere you cannot. Protect them in ways you never could, and love them even more faithfully than you have. Releasing them is not abandoning them. It is placing them where they have always most truly belonged, in the keeping of God. And there is a deep rest in that, in finally laying down the impossible burden of being their everything, and trusting them to the one who actually is. And let the relationship become what it is meant to become now, rather than grieving only what it was. The bond does not end when the active parenting does. It changes form. And the new form, if you let it grow, can be one of the great gifts of the later years. You are moving from being their manager to being their friend, from the one who directs to the one who is sought out for counsel, from the voice that corrects to the voice that simply loves and listens. This new relationship cannot be forced or rushed, and it asks something hard of you: to step back, to stop managing, to let them be the adults they have become, to offer your wisdom only when it is wanted, and your love always. But the parents who make that shift, who release the old form of the relationship to make room for the new, often find that what grows is sweeter than they expected. A friendship between adults who happen to share a lifetime of love. A closeness no longer built on need, but on choice. The relationship is not over. It is being reborn into something that, given time and grace, may become even more precious than what came before. Rediscover the self that was always there underneath the role, somewhere beneath all the years of being needed. There is a person God made, with gifts and longings and a calling all your own. And that person did not disappear when the children left. Take the time now to rediscover who you are before God, apart from any role, to remember the things you loved, the dreams you set aside, the person you were and still are. This is not selfish. It is part of stepping faithfully into the new season. The God who made you has things for you to be and do that have nothing to do with whether anyone needs you for them. And the quiet you are dreading may become the space in which you finally hear Him calling you into them. And do not let the old guilt tell you this rediscovery is selfish, because it is not. For years you may have poured yourself out so completely that there was nothing left over for your own soul, your own gifts, your own walk with God. And that self-forgetting was right and beautiful in its season. But the season has changed. And tending the self God gave you is not a betrayal of the love you showed your children. It is the next form of faithfulness. You cannot pour from an empty vessel forever. And God never asked you to disappear entirely into the role. He gave you a mind, talents, longings, a particular way of reflecting Him into the world. And He does not want those buried in the name of a sacrifice that is no longer required. So take up the things you laid down. Return to the gifts you set aside. Ask God to reawaken the dreams that went quiet under the demands of the busy years. This is not abandoning your calling as a parent. That calling has simply matured. This is stewarding the whole self God entrusted to you, the self that was always meant to keep growing, even, especially, now, and find new soil for the love that has nowhere to go. The love you poured into your children did not disappear when they left. It is still in you, looking for somewhere to flow. So let it flow. Pour it into your marriage, into friendships long neglected during the busy years, into grandchildren if you have them, into the younger ones who need a mentor, into your church, your neighbors, the lonely and the struggling who would be so blessed by the very love and wisdom you have to give. The capacity for love that motherhood and fatherhood grew in you was never meant to end with your own children. It was meant to overflow, in this season, into a world that needs it. And in the giving of it, you may find your new purpose taking shape, almost without your noticing. And if the grief of this passage feels too heavy to carry alone, do not hesitate to reach for help. For some, the empty nest is a tender sadness that softens with time. For others, it opens into something deeper, a loss of identity so disorienting, or a loneliness so consuming that it sinks toward depression, and the days lose their color. If that is closer to your experience, please know there is no shame in seeking support, in talking to a counselor or pastor, in letting trusted friends walk closely with you, in being honest with a doctor if the heaviness will not lift. Reaching for help in a hard transition is not weakness, it is wisdom. The same wisdom you would urge on anyone you love who is struggling. You spent years tending everyone else. It is not selfish in this season to let yourself be tended. God often brings us through these passages not in isolation, but through the care of others. And allowing yourself to be cared for may be one of the ways He carries you through. You do not have to navigate the empty house or the heavy heart entirely on your own. Let me leave you with this, and then I will let you go gently. Think of a gardener who plants a sapling. For years, the gardener tends it faithfully, watering it, staking it against the wind, protecting it from frost, pruning it with care, giving it everything it needs to grow. And the whole time, through all that labor, there is one goal quietly guiding every act of care: that one day, this tree will stand on its own. That is the entire point of the tending, not to keep the sapling small and dependent and close, but to grow it into a tree strong enough to stand without stakes, deep-rooted enough to weather its own storms, tall enough to bear its own fruit, and to shelter, one day, others beneath its branches. And when that day comes, when the tree finally stands on its own, and the gardener's hands are no longer needed, that is not the failure of the gardener's work. It is its fulfillment. The empty space where the gardener once knelt and labored is not a sign that something was lost. It is the sign that everything the gardener was working toward has come to pass. And think about what that grown tree now does, all on its own, that it never could have done as a sapling under the gardener's stakes. It shelters birds in its branches. It shades the weary who pass beneath it. It drops its own seeds and gives rise to other trees. It bears fruit that feeds people the gardener will never meet. Everything the tree now gives to the world, it can give precisely because it grew up and grew strong and was finally released to stand on its own. Had it stayed small and staked and dependent forever, it would never have sheltered or fed anything. Its standing alone is the very thing that lets it bless the world. And so it is with the children you raised, the good they will do, the people they will love, the lives they will shelter. All of it flows from the fact that they were able to leave and stand and become. You are not watching your life's work walk away from you. You are watching it begin, at last, to bear the fruit it was always growing toward, fruit that will fall in fields you will never see, and feed people you will never know, because you did the long, faithful work of growing a tree strong enough to stand without you. Your children were the saplings you tended, and now they are trees, standing on their own, bearing their own fruit, sheltering others, doing the very thing all your years of love were always aiming at. You did not lose them. You grew them, and they have become what you raised them to be. And the God who is the Lord of every garden, who turns the seasons and never runs out of soil to tend, has more for you to grow now. New ground to kneel in, new life to nurture, new fruit to bear in a season you have not yet seen. The garden of your life is not finished, dear one. One part of it has simply grown up and grown tall, exactly as it was meant to. And the gardener of your soul is even now leading you, gently, into the next thing he has given you to tend. The quiet is not the end. It is the turning of a page, and the one who has written every season of your life is already writing this one, full of a purpose you will come to see in time, was waiting for you here all along. And when you wake tomorrow to the quiet house, and the ache rises again with the morning light, take this with you and hold it through the day. I did not lose them. I launched them, and I am not finished, and neither is God. Say it when you reach for the second cart, when you pass the empty room, when the silence presses in. You are not at the end. You are a gardener handed new ground, a soul stepping into a season your faithful years were quietly preparing you for. The love you gave was not spent. It was planted, and it is still growing, in them and out into a world that needs it. The God who walked you through every noisy, exhausting, beautiful year of raising them is walking beside you now, into the quiet, with as much tenderness and as much purpose as he has ever had. So let the silence settle, not as an ending, but as the hush before a new beginning. Your children have grown and gone, exactly as they were meant to. And you, dear one, are not done. You are being led, gently, by the gardener of every season, into the next good thing he has been preparing for you all along. The page is turning, the story goes on, and the best of what God has for you may still lie ahead, in the very quiet you feared was the end.